This is Jimmer Fredette, a college basketball star who dropped 50-point games like it was nothing, set the Brigham Young record for most points scored in a single game, and was called the best scorer in the whole country by both Kevin Durant and President Barack Obama. Jimmer was supposed to be the next Steph Curry, but just 4 years after being drafted 10th overall, he was out of the NBA. Some blamed his ego, and others said he just simply refused to improve or adapt. Or maybe he was never built for the league in the first place. So what really happened? How did one of the most iconic college basketball stars of all time go from unstoppable to irrelevant? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to the 1990s in Glens Falls, New York. James Taft Fredette, or better known by the nickname his mother gave him at birth, Jimmer, is the youngest of 3 brothers, and it was his eldest, TJ, who had the largest impact on his baby brother. Because when the youngest Fredette was just 7 years old, TJ, understanding his own dream of making it all the way to the NBA had failed, had his sibling sign a contract stating that Jimmer would do whatever it took to achieve his own NBA dreams. But this wasn't the only way the baby Fredette's eldest brother would help him with his ultimate goal.
I think it came from my brother. He's 7 years older than I was. I was always playing with him and his friends, so I couldn't really take it to the basket when I was young. I was just shooting from the outside. That's what I had to do, and I'd have to get my shot off quick because they would block it. They wouldn't care. They would just block it and go through, and then I would get all mad. So I learned how to shoot from deep ranges from a young age.
Yet, as Jimmer grew, TJ began to realize he no longer felt challenged competing against himself and his friends. Therefore, using his connections with a local correctional facility, the eldest Fredette would bring his teenage brother into their local prison to compete in pickup games against the inmates. An opportunity which helped Jimmer learn to not only compete against bigger and stronger players, but in hostile environments where everyone was against you. Fredette's prison battles, plus the guidance provided by his eldest brother and the truly insane work ethic that he possessed, would see Jimmer end his senior season at Glens Falls High School having achieved some insane things. The 18-year-old, thanks to achievements such as scoring over 2,000 career points, thanks to a near 32-point average in his final campaign, would be ranked as a top 75 point guard in the nation and commit to Brigham Young University during his final scholastic season. However, upon arriving on BYU's campus for his freshman year, Jimmer fell into an issue that many incoming collegiate athletes face: the bench. But despite this adversity, Fredette remained focused on what he could control as he worked towards achieving his one true goal.
Yeah, I took practices as games, right? Because that's what it was for me. If you want to get on the court, you have to have the mentality in practice that, you're going to, do everything you can to show coach that, you should be out there and make it obvious, right? You have to make it obvious, like, oh man, I can't keep this kid off the court.
A mindset which, by the time his junior campaign arrived, saw the Glens Falls native finally begin to see the floor. But it was on December 22nd, 2009, where everything truly changed for Jimmer Fredette. Because after opening his night by doing this,
1-on-1, good entry. Fredette draws the foul.
The Brigham Young guard had a different look in his eye, one that defenses had yet to see since high school. Jimmer would then go on to rip apart the Nevada Wolfpack's defense in a multitude of ways, whether it was crafty finishes near the hoop,
Fredette manufactures one,
or knocking down threes.
Fredette will drive a 3, and that's good.
The rim seemed to be as large as the court itself for Fredette. However, Nevada didn't care about this 6'2" dude from New York having his moment. No. In fact, if that same guy from small town upstate New York doesn't step up right now, BYU's 5-game winning streak will be erased.
Just to salt the game away. Well, running off tackle to get first downs in football.
103-98. I feel like I'm doing an NBA game.
Jimmer's clutch, game-saving free throws had not only extended BYU's streak, but the junior guard had achieved a couple of huge things. Firstly, he had set a brand new collegiate career high of 33 points, as well as scoring his 1,000th point for the Cougars. Yet, what happened just 6 days later was even more shocking.
Checked in for the first time. Fredette shakes free again.
Speaking of shocking things, did you know that today's video sponsor, Odoo, doesn't just offer website building? In fact, Odoo is an all-in-one business management suite where you can manage literally everything from accounting, sales, managing your inventory, and directly relating with your customers. But that's not all, because Odoo, for example, let's say you're building a brand that resells sneakers. With Odoo, you could build a website, add a shop, integrate Stripe for point of sale if you were to open a store, keep track of your inventory at all times, and optimize everything about your business with just one application, Odoo. The best part is, Odoo is user-friendly. They have built-in ChatGPT to help with things such as chat support, and the even greater part is, you can try Odoo free for 14 days with no credit card needed. Click the link in the description or pinned comment to get started and unlock the tools to run your entire business your way. Thanks again to Odoo for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to Jimmer Fredette, who over the past 2.5 seasons has shown that he is a capable collegiate level guard, has yet to prove to NBA scouts that he is actually ready to take that next step. So, motivated to get himself on the radar of general managers, Jimmer began to pour in 3 after 3.
You gotta get up in guys' faces and get a hand up.
Fredette.
It literally didn't matter what Arizona Wildcats head coach Sean Miller threw at BYU's rising star. The Glens Falls native was making it seem like he was literally incapable of missing.
It's a week, particularly on the road to the Pac-10.
Fresh legs.
Yep, there he is.
Not only had Jimmer Fredette, thanks to knocking down a huge 9 threes, broken his own career high that he literally set 6 days ago, but he had given the McHale Center a new arena high of 49 points. But the NBA still didn't care. Destroying the defense of a 6-6 collegiate program meant nothing. No, if Fredette was ever going to fulfill his contractual obligations to his older brother, he needed to have performances like this on much larger stages. However, do you want to know what does mean something? Clicking subscribe, which to me, as someone who spends hundreds of hours on each of these videos, would mean a lot. Thank you. March 18th, 2010, BYU, thanks to their brand new star point guards' 20.6 point and 47% from 3 averages, had managed to only lose 4 games whilst winning 26, a record high enough to earn them access to the NCAA's March Madness tournament. But the Cougars faced a serious issue.
BYU has suffered 7 consecutive first-round exits. The Cougars trying to change that against the Florida team back in the tournament for the first time since winning back-to-back national titles.
Yet, while Florida Gators head coach Billy Donovan had shared that he believed Jimmer was a more dangerous player than the eventual 2010 College Player of the Year John Wall, could he actually step up and change the course of BYU history? Overtime. If Jimmer is going to be the one to break the Cougars' first-round curse, he's going to have to do something that Florida guard Irving Walker can't match.
Emery may find himself open. Emery was second in the Mountain West Conference in three-point shooting. The switch on defense. Now Macklin is watching Fredette with a 3. Bullseye! What a shot by Fredette!
Fredette's inspiring leadership hadn't just guided BYU to dominate the extra period 12-5, but also saw the potential NBA guard score a whopping 37 points in their streak-breaking game. Yet, after failing to move on during their second-round matchup versus Kansas State, thanks to Jimmer only producing 22 points, all whilst turning the ball over 5 times, the changes in draft interest Fredette had hoped to see hadn't come to fruition. His name wasn't on mock drafts, his phone was empty, and the Glens Falls native began to realize something. If he was ever going to make himself, his family, but most importantly, TJ proud, his senior year was going to have to be one of the greatest final seasons in collegiate basketball history. January 11th, 2011, motivated to carry his Brigham Young squad deeper into the March Madness tournament, Jimmer Fredette had to not only increase his scoring average to 24.9 points, but over his squad's first 17 battles, Jimmer had guided them to 16 wins. However, the NBA still didn't care. In fact, it wasn't until he did this before halftime in a rivalry game versus the Utah Utes.
Jimmer from 40 feet. Got it! He got it! Oh!
that the world started paying attention.
Phrase in college basketball, jimmered. Last season, TCU and Arizona, they got jimmered. Fredette hung 45 and 49 on them last week. UNLV 39, they got jimmered. Tonight, his last game in the Huntsman, Fredette jimmered the Utes. It means going off on your opponent with impunity.
However, it wasn't actually until Fredette battled the undefeated, Kawhi Leonard-led San Diego State Aztecs
I'm a fun guy.
that he was able to grab general managers by their collars, as it literally had zero impact on Jimmer, who San Diego State's 2011 National Coach of the Year award-winning leader, Steve Fisher, threw at him. Whether it was their defensive-minded point guard, DJ Gay,
Fredette shakes him. That's amazing about Fredette.
Or larger wings such as Billy White,
He's still not in the game. And Steven Rogers is checked in for the first time. Fredette shakes free again.
or Chase Tapley, Fredette was simply too locked in on his goal to care. BYU's 13-point victory, combined with Jimmer's 43-point night and the fact that the Cougars had just handed San Diego State their first loss of the season, saw Fredette gain some serious respect from those in the league above him.
You just got jimmered. Oh. If you're not a college basketball fan, you probably think I just insulted you. But if you are, you know it means Jimmer Fredette of BYU just dropped another record night on you. Ask San Diego State, one of two remaining unbeatens until Fredette put up 43 of his team's 71 points in the Cougars' win. Kevin Durant, the NBA's leading scorer, calls Fredette the best scorer in the country at any level.
Yet, Jimmer Mania, as it was being called, only got more insane. March 11th, 2011. After destroying the TCU Horned Frogs in the first round of the Mountain West Conference Tournament, BYU is set for a second-round battle against the New Mexico Lobos. However, the Cougars have a serious problem on their hands, because Brigham Young had failed to defeat the Lobos in both of their regular season matchups, and a loss here would solidify Fredette, at least in the eyes of scouts, simply as an empty stat player, an individual who only had huge games when it mattered least.
Of this BYU team, step back again. You cannot give Fredette any space because that step back can be lethal.
They get a more open shot than that one.
Fredette dead on. Jimmer Fredette, 17.
And 4 different guys have guarded Jimmer Fredette in this game already.
And none of them have stopped him.
Not only had the senior guard played one of the most ethical first halves in the game's history, scoring 33 points without shooting a single free throw, but as the second half rounded out, Jimmer would break 2 huge records.
Fredette has just become the all-time leading scorer in BYU history, and I think it's a fairly good chance he's going to get the first 50-point game of his career.
On his arm.
And after 49 points, he finally gets to the foul line for the first time, and he has the first 50-point game of an astounding career.
Combine their incredible victory against New Mexico and Fredette's mind-blowing 52-point night, the potential NBA player was gaining comparison to another collegiate star with an impeccable jump shot.
Well, I think you can draw a great comparison with Steph Curry of Davidson. Now, BYU is a much better team, I think, than that Davidson team. But if you remember in 2008, Steph Curry almost single-handedly led Davidson within a possession of beating Kansas and getting to the Final Four. As we've seen throughout the course of this season, Jimmer Fredette has that capability with BYU. You mentioned 3 of the last 4 games he scored over 40 points. 2 of those games were on the road. He had 47 at Utah, 42 against Colorado State in Fort Collins. Jimmer Fredette came back for his senior year to not just improve his draft stock, because he loved college basketball and a great shot to lead BYU to a potential Final Four date in Houston.
Yet, it wasn't just reporters giving the Cougar point guard the recognition he deserved.
I know you've been extremely busy. Have you had any kind of chance to see Jimmer Fredette from BYU?
Unbelievable. Best scorer, obviously, in the country. Great talent.
But it wasn't only the current US president and NBA scoring champ showing love to Fredette, because the star guard, after leading the country in scoring, was crowned as the National Collegiate Player of the Year. However, things weren't all positive, as Brandon Davies, the team's 3rd leading scorer and power forward, was suspended during the season for violating the honor code at BYU. A devastating loss, which placed a huge hole in the Cougars' ability to not only match up with larger teams, but rebound. Therefore, Brigham Young would fall 2 games short of the Final Four prediction many had for their squad. So, given that Jimmer had only carried his team to the Sweet 16, had he actually done enough to earn an NBA roster spot?
With the 10th pick in the 2011 NBA Draft, the Milwaukee Bucks select Jimmer Fredette from Brigham Young University.
Jimmer Mania, Jimmer Fever, whatever you want to call it, came to the NBA Draft. The big question, where are you going to get drafted? And then you get drafted, you get traded. What's this whole thing been like for you?
You know, it was exciting to hear your name called, and then you have to wait for about 2.5 hours before you can officially be called the king and go through the media circuit. So it was a weird night, but I had a great time.
December 18th, 2011.
Coach Westfall, he was the one that drafted me with the Maloofs and, Jeff Petrie. And, he wanted me to beat me, which I appreciated. Like, he was like, hey, I want you to go out there and shoot shots, pull up, do your thing.
Motivated from the belief and support that his head coach and organization gave him, Jimmer was ready to show everyone who thought his game wouldn't translate to the highest level of basketball that they were in fact wrong. So, Fredette opened his pro career exactly how everyone expected.
But certainly he's going to play some at both spots.
Jimmer Fredette.
And although this was a preseason game, the reality that Jimmer was getting the same shots off he did in college was promising. In fact, after ending this battle with 21 points, Paul Westfall and the Glens Falls native were excited for what the 2011-2012 regular season had in store. However, after having his breakout regular season performance on January 3rd, 2012 by scoring 17 points against the Memphis Grizzlies, everything came crashing down.
Coach Westfall was the coach that drafted me. It was great, loved it, and then 2 weeks into the season he got fired, right? Now the coach gets fired. The one that was on your side. At that time, the Kings were the Maloof family was trying to sell the team as well. We thought we were going to Seattle that whole season.
Fredette was devastated. The coach and ownership group, which believed so heavily in his talents, was gone. To make things even worse, the promotion of assistant coach Keith Smart into the lead role saw the Kings' 10th pick's minutes begin to suddenly decline. But why? Well, not only did Sacramento have the 2010 NBA Rookie of the Year, Tyreke Evans,
Tyreke at the hole. Yes! Oh my goodness! If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
But their choice 50 picks after Jimmer, Isaiah Thomas, was also beginning to flourish under Keith.
And then Isaiah has created momentum with his play and how he has played. So, he could be in this situation of a game matchup situation. He could be the first guy off, or it could be someone else. But I just know that he's going to play a certain way every time he's on the floor. He's confident, and the team is confident with him on the floor, and I'm confident in him.
However, despite the sudden turnaround in his season, Jimmer Fredette was still keen on proving that the offense should be designed around him and not anybody else on their roster. So, whenever he did get an opportunity, such as during a late January game against the Memphis Grizzlies, the ex-BYU star would completely take over the offense.
Fredette, good again.
In fact, not only would Fredette score 20 points off the bench against the Grizzlies, but he would follow this performance up with a highly efficient 5 from 7 from the field, 13-point night against the Portland Trail Blazers. Efforts which saw head coach Keith Smart shift gears, as on January 25th, 2012, Jimmer Fredette was reinserted back into the Sacramento Kings starting lineup. But it wasn't exactly what the Glens Falls native wanted, because Coach Smart, knowing just how talented his team's 10th pick was at shooting, saw a vision of the player Jimmer could eventually become. Therefore, Fredette found a role as the team's shooting guard, playing alongside Isaiah Thomas at point. However, whilst this idea actually worked, with Jimmer knocking down 5 of his 8 threes versus the Nuggets, and dropping 14 points in what seemed to be a welcome home game at Utah against the Jazz, a brand new issue arose. One that Coach Smart, a defensive-minded leader, simply couldn't look past. Because Fredette, given his 6'2" frame, struggled to defend the generally larger shooting guards in isolation. And when Keith did play Jimmer at point, the former BYU star had issues navigating pick and rolls.
Cole Aldridge, former lottery pick out of Kansas as well, getting some much needed.
Or staying in front of the quicker, more explosive NBA guards.
On the shot clock.
his head and ball goes right to the basket. You can't do that if you're Jimmer Fredette.
Therefore, Fredette began to see the floor less and less, even receiving multiple did-not-play coach decisions.
And all of a sudden, my playing time, I went from, playing about 20, 25 minutes a game to the next 3 games, literally didn't play at all. Didn't even get off the bench. And that messed with my head crazy.
Not only had his minutes shrunk to just 14.8 per game on average, but the lack of trust from Coach Smart and the massive contrast in how Jimmer was being used compared to his time in college saw Fredette enter a massive slump. The former sniper, who used to effortlessly knock down threes from behind NBA range, was now only shooting 34% from 3 and averaging just 6.3 points per game. Yet, when he did get the chance to start and play in the role he wanted, Jimmer was solid. For example, on April 8, 2012 against the Houston Rockets. Not only was Fredette given a chance to start, but it's clear he refused to fit into the role the NBA and Keith Smart was trying to squeeze him into. Instead, the ex-Cougar began scoring in the exact same way he did at BYU, using his teammates to help him get into better scoring positions before unleashing his truly devastating jumper.
He's making
A mindset which the Glens Falls native carried over into the 2012 NBA Summer League, as given the whole offense was literally designed around Jimmer, the former BYU star was free to literally do whatever he wanted, whether it was utilizing screens,
You are good. Fredette off a screen, the pull-up fader, got it.
dribbling for whole possessions at a time without passing,
And Jimmer Fredette so far 1 of 6 from the field, 6 of 6 from the line. Comes off the screen, hesitates, gets in deep, double pumps, leans back and scores.
or attacking defenses 1-on-5,
Well, I mean, that's just, he's filling the stat sheet. That's one of those guys you want to fill the stat sheet.
And Monty Yunus showing good hands too on that catch and shoot. And here is Fredette.
Fredette was getting back to his old Jimmer mania ways. However, upon returning to the Sacramento Kings for the 2012-2013 season, reality hit Jimmer Fredette. Hit him as hard as you should hit the like button. Thanks. Because it was clear the type of role Coach Smart saw Fredette playing that season. Isaiah Thomas was going to be the team's starting point guard, and Jimmer was set to fill an off-the-bench shooting guard role moving forward. Yet, Jimmer Fredette was unwilling to try and dominate in this role. In fact, reports started to come out alleging that Fredette wanted to play like he did at BYU and believed the offense should revolve around him. But when actually given those opportunities for the Kings, Isaiah Thomas was simply a better option for Sacramento. However, a path for Fredette to dominate the way he wanted already existed. It's one a very similar player to himself had already walked down. JJ Redick, the former Duke Blue Devils megastar, had also struggled initially after being picked 11th overall by the Orlando Magic in the 2006 draft. JJ, who much like Jimmer, was the focal point of his college offense, attempted to mirror his play at Duke for Orlando. And again, much like Jimmer, faced the same struggles. But Redick, instead of trying to brute force his way into the role he wanted, simply adapted. JJ worked tirelessly on mastering the required skills to become an off-ball sniper, someone that every single team in the NBA would love to have. A mindset shift which saw the former collegiate superstar go on to play in the 2009 finals, have a 15-year NBA career, and earn over $115 million. Yet, Jimmer wasn't interested in this path. No, his ego simply didn't allow him to want to improve as an off-ball player. He had spent his whole life being the guy on his teams, and that wasn't gonna change. To make things even worse for Fredette, the firing of Keith Smart saw former Golden State assistant Mike Malone take the reins. While this presented a new opportunity for Jimmer to reinsert himself into Isaiah Thomas's role, Coach Malone quickly fell in love with Isaiah's game. Therefore, the former 10th pick's minutes tanked further and further, only averaging 11.3 per game. Yet, the path which many had taken before him still existed, and with Jimmer's insane 49% from 3 average during the 2013-2014 season, plus his NBA career-high night versus the New York Knicks of 24 points, proved he could dominate for years to come. But only if he was willing to accept a lesser role, one that he simply didn't want to. So, after the Sacramento Kings and their former lottery pick agreed on a contract buyout shortly after his dominant game versus the Knicks, Jimmer would sign with a brand new team, the Chicago Bulls. However, their head coach, Tom Thibodeau, a leader with a strict focus on defense and one that played a very tight rotation, had little interest in an undersized shooting guard who struggled on the defensive end. Therefore, after once again failing to find his footing, only averaging 7 minutes per game during his time with the Bulls, Jimmer began to search elsewhere, and during the offseason, Fredette saw an opportunity, one that he just couldn't pass up. Anthony Morrow, the now former New Orleans Pelicans starting shooting guard, had just signed with the Oklahoma City Thunder for the 2014-2015 season. So New Orleans, seeking a sniper to replace Morrow's shocking 45% from 3 average, decided to offer Fredette a 1-year veteran minimum deal. But upon arriving in Louisiana, everything started to go even further downhill for Jimmer Fredette. Not only would the former sharpshooter fail to perform to his high standards, only making an average of 18% of his threes all season long, but when starting point guard Jrue Holiday went down with a season-ending injury, Jimmer failed to step up into Jrue's role. Fredette's inability to not only improve but adapt his game to the NBA would ultimately see the projected star's career completely fizzle out. While he did sign a training camp deal with the San Antonio Spurs before the 2015-2016 season and eventually played 4 games with the Pelicans on an injury hardship deal, Jimmer's NBA career was over. Or was it? Because this wasn't exactly the end of his professional career. Jimmer Fredette, still holding on to his NBA dreams, didn't seek opportunities overseas for more money. No, he entered his name into the NBA Development League draft, in which the former lottery selection was chosen second by his home state team, the Westchester Knicks. So would he eventually find his way back onto an NBA roster? November 31st, 2015, Mike Miller, no, not that one, the Westchester Knicks head coach knew exactly who he had just drafted in Jimmer Fredette, because with Floyd Mayweather in attendance, a familiar sight began to appear.
Angles, had to maneuver himself. There he is again.
With the former Cougar star now playing in an almost identical role to his time at BYU, Jimmer was truly dominant.
Jimmer goes right to the rim.
Not only had the ex-King dropped 37 points in his D-League debut, but as the season progressed, despite initially feeling down about his situation, things would only get more and more insane.
At first, it's like, man, I don't really want to be here. This is not exactly what I, envisioned my career path, but at the same time, I'm here. Like, there's no changing that at this point. This is the reality of the situation. And then once I got in and started practice, then it was just basketball, right? Then it's like, oh man, I actually really like this all of a sudden, because now I'm a focal point of the team again. Now I'm a guy that can go out and play, and kind of a guy that's been through a little bit, has a little bit of better leadership. People are asking me questions about what's going on. It started to change a little bit, where it's like, okay, this feels better, feels a little more comfortable. They want me to shoot the ball. They want me to be the way that I can be. And I was like, all right, this is great. You know what? I'm going to try to take this opportunity and try to be the best that I possibly can be. Like, my teammates, are allowing me to do this. My coaching staff wants me to do this. And, I feel like it benefits the team if I play the way that I play. And so because of that, I really, really enjoyed my time in the G League.
Jimmer would go on to have back-to-back 36 and 37-point games against the CU Skyforce, get called up to play for the New York Knicks for 2 games, and then go on to win the D-League All-Star Game MVP award. While he did lose the 3-point comp to a math teacher, Fredette's 21.1 point and 41.1% from 3 averages had showcased, if given the same opportunity he received at BYU, Jimmer Fredette could be a high-level bucket getter. However, NBA teams just weren't interested. Yet, now at age 26, the Glens Falls native had matured.
But my ego got out of the way, once I got older, once I went to China, my ego was out of the way. I was like, I'm either going to get a shot or not. And whatever happens, happens. And, I'm cool with it. It's just, if I did get a shot, I was prepared. Let's just put it that way.
With Jimmer Fredette signing in China, he wasn't just going to get the ball. He was going to be expected to have 30-plus point nights in every single game. Not only would Fredette dominate on the offensive side of the floor, But after he dropped 70 plus points on 3 separate occasions, the former 10th pick would receive one of the coolest nicknames I've ever heard.
It's Jimo Dashin is what it's called. And Jimo means lonely, and it sounds like Jimmer, Jimo, and that's how people kind of pronounce my name over here. They can't really pronounce the ER, so they say Jimo, Jimo, and it means lonely, and then they put Dashin at the end, which means actually God, I guess, and then we changed it kind of to Lonely Master. So I didn't want to be known as a god, so I just said, let's do the Lonely Master.
And having finally dropped his ego, Jimmer was ready to return to the highest stage of the game. April 3rd, 2019, the Phoenix Suns, after learning about the mental growth and maturation in Jimmer Fredette's game, decided to take a chance on the former 10th pick. In what was the former Kings' 4th match back, Jimmer was showcasing what he could have been if he had accepted his fate earlier on in his career. Fredette's 10-point outing, which consisted mostly of off-the-ball buckets, showcased he was actually ready to have a long career in the NBA. But unfortunately, the Phoenix Suns would ultimately not pick up the Lonely Master's 2nd year on his contract. However, this time around, Jimmer was just happy to have proven to himself that he could still play at the highest level of basketball, and Fredette was excited for what was next. Jimmer would then go on to sign in Greece for Panathinaikos, where he was set to play alongside American-born EuroLeague legend point guard Nick Kalathis and under 2-time NCAA national championship winning head coach Rick Pitino. Fredette would then go on, in part thanks to the European style of play that is littered with complex half-court sets, all designed to get him open, to average just under 13 points on 41% shooting from 3 in EuroLeague play. But his career, after a pandemic ended his European season early, was about to take an interesting turn, as Jimmer Fredette would then go on to represent Team USA at the 2024 Paris Olympics in a brand new variation of basketball, 3x3, a style which suited Fredette's game perfectly. By the way, if you hoop and you've never played 3x3, go enter yourself in a local tournament. It's honestly so much fun. Or just Google the rules and play it instead of pick up one day. I highly recommend it. Anyway, whilst Fredette and his 3x3 Team USA teammates, which included Rick Barry's son, Canyon Barry, who, yes, shoots free throws just like his father, failed to capture a gold medal at the Paris Olympics, Jimmer remains heavily involved in the 3x3 game, as after announcing his retirement on April 23rd, 2025, the BYU legend accepted a role as the managing director of Team USA's men's national 3x3 basketball squad. At the end of the day, Jimmer Fredette did end up having an incredible basketball journey, one that is a gazillion times more exciting than anything I've ever done. But his time at the highest level of the game could have been so much more. His unwillingness to improve in and accept a different role to that of which he held during his time in high school and at Brigham Young was unfortunately the main reason for his short and bumpy NBA career. So what do you think? If Jimmer had followed a similar path to that of JJ Redick, do you think he could still be playing in the league to this day? Or do you believe his frame and athletic traits were simply more suited for overseas basketball? Let me know down below in the comments. Speaking of collegiate success, did you know that there was a time period in NBA history where players didn't even have to go to college to get drafted? In fact, players like Shawn Kemp, the most vicious and violent dunker in NBA history, despite committing to Kentucky, never played a single minute in NCAA competition, but still destroyed everyone at the highest level of the game. To learn more about not only how Shawn Kemp became such a vicious dunker, but how his career ended in a tragic downfall, click the video on your screen right now.